another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host, Tom D'Ambra. As always, we are very thankful you took the time from your busy day to join us. I would like to say a sincere thank you to all of you who have been watching the program through the resource of the internet on YouTube. The positive comments, the well wishes, the request for protection of prayer, and also is very uplifting. And we are now have been viewed in 27 different nations, which is very exciting to us. And understand, my friends, this is not just a battle for America. Technology has taken us beyond that point. This is a battle for the sovereignty of the human race. The goal of these international bankers, and as in their own writings, is number one, to reduce the population by 80% of what it is now. And then the 20% that is left is to put us into confinement spaces. And we did programs on this many years ago with regards to Agenda 21, which was put in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro. And my friends, Agenda 21 affects everybody's life on a daily basis. If you think that the property taxes through the to finance the indoctrination system that you call the public school system is just happen chance, my friends, you're wrong. This was all spoken about in Agenda 21, how they were going to literally tax the people out of the rural areas. And it's been very, very effective. If there's a lot of young people that are leaving the state of Vermont, as beautiful as it is to live here, for one, for lack of opportunity. For number two, also the tax system in this state is ludicrous. You know, I've been working since I was 8 years old. I'm 56 years old right now, and I literally mean my first job, I was 8 years old. I pumped gas. And I made $2 for 6 hours work. But you know, my friends, back then, if you want to go by, not that I had a sweet tooth, but if you want to go by what's valuable to a young American kid in the early 60s, you know, let's look at the price of a candy bar. Candy bar was a nickel. Candy bar today is $1. Well, we don't have dollars, and you know that from watching this program. We have Federal Reserve notes. So we have come a full gamut, and the war that's being waged against us right now is not just as Americans, although the main target of the globalists right now, because we are probably one of the very last footholds of liberty, even though that liberty is diminished to a great degree from when we had the foundational and founding eras of this nation. But when you look at what their tools are, my friends, their tools are multifaceted, and it doesn't just come down to the fear of the strong arm, the strong arm, the arms, the militarization of our law enforcement to put the fear into the people. A lot of it is through asymmetrical and symmetrical warfare. And what I mean by that is they control our thought process. They do it through the indoctrination system. You call it the education system. And if you wonder why I call it an indoctrination system, do your research, and you can start at Charlotte Iserbyt's book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. She was a former Undersecretary of Education during the Reagan administration. And I will tell you, you want to talk about a woman who cannot look in the mirror anymore, and she has come forth with truth and knowledge and courage to bring all this information forth. But the school system is exactly that. It is a mechanism of social engineering. And I think Hitler said it the best: give me your children for one generation, you will no longer matter. Well, that you he's speaking to was the parents of the children. And that's where we are now. I see here in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, which is where this program is processed and produced, that they're very excited now, because now the children are going to be going to school at 3 years old. Well, who's raising the children? Who's raising the children? These children, between the indoctrination system and the television set, are going to be spending more time adhering to the wishes, the demands, and the cultivation, mind cultivation literally, of the state, which is nothing more but the step above when you look at who the stringholders really are to all these puppets that interject in our lives on a daily basis. It is the international bankers. And the reason how they've done this is because literally on average, 62% of your income is going to the state and or the bankers. So if you have a two-parent family, which is becoming more of a rarity these days in America, and there's a reason for that. This is all done on purpose. This isn't happened by happen chance. This is all a coordinated effort to destroy the foundation of this nation, which was Christianity and the family. So what they're doing now, my friends, is that because you got two parents, one person, if you get 62% of the pie is going out without anything being done for the benefit of the family, besides keeping the jackbooted thugs from the door, is that you now, one parent is working their entire year, 50%, to the government / bankers, and the other person is working 12% of their time to the government / bankers. So who's raising your children? The puppets, the mechanisms, the tools of employ through the international bankers. Another big aspect of this tool that they have is the media. And I thought it would be interesting if we just did a simple review of one particular newspaper that I subscribe to. I'm not promoting this newspaper. I am using this as an example of what we get in the mainstream media. And I'm going to get down into you from the congressional record itself, how we, the American people, lost control of what we perceive to be the mainstream media. Now, there's two things I'd like to bring up before I read from the congressional record. One, I know we did a program on this about 4 years ago. As a matter of fact, I think we had so much information we wound up doing 2 weeks on this topic. But remember the quote of John Swinton. John Swinton was a retiring editor of the New York Post, I believe it was. This was in 1924. And at his retirement gala, of course they're having a couple of drinks, it came time for John Swinton to speak. Now this man had been in the print media, which was the dominant media of the day. If you remember, my friends, the radio was just barely coming to at that point. There was no television. Obviously, there was no internet. Most people in the rural communities didn't even have telephones at that time. So understand, print was it. And to control the print meant you were controlling the information and to some degree the thought process, because if you have limited information to analyze and to assess, then you cannot have a complete process of being analytical. You're only basing your processes on a limited and biased information. So what he said, now understand, this man was in this for literally for decades. He started out as a child in the press, being what we would know as a paper boy today. But what he said was rather interesting. When it came time for him to speak, he said, what a folly, the talk of a free media in America. For everyone knows within the sound of my voice. Now he is speaking to fellow editors, assistant editors, writers, and so forth of the media of that day. And he said, for everyone in the sound of my voice knows that if we had published our true thoughts, we would not have our job within 24 hours. For we are intellectual prostitutes kneeling at the feet of Mammon in sacrifice of our nation, our people, and its future. That's John Swinton. I read that whole statement to you verbatim, like I said years ago. And then you have people like Charlotte Iserbyt, who was Undersecretary of Education during the Reagan administration, comes out with such unbelievable documentation and courage that the deliberate dumbing down of America, speaking about and writing about to a great degree why our children are being dumbed down through the school system, why our homeschoolers on the anti-terrorist watch list from Department of Homeland Security, because there is a war on for your minds, my friends. They do not want a healthy, vibrant, articulate, free-thinking, analytical people. They want an ill, dumbed down people. We read to you some time ago the document Secret Weapons for Quiet Wars, spoke plainly how they were going to take the reading level of the average American student, high school graduate student, from at the time, which was 1954, to when they took over the school system, which was 1964, to today. You realize that they said they wanted to get the reading level down to a 6th grade reading level. Well, you know what? They've even gone past their expectations, because the average American student, high school graduate student right now, has a reading level of 4th grade as compared to 1964 when the feds took over education. It went from education to indoctrination. Hitler said it very well: give me your children for one generation, you will no longer matter. You were the parents of Germany. And now here in St. Johnsbury, everyone's excited because, oh, it's great, we got funding for the children to go to school from 3 years old and on. 3 years old. Who's raising your children? I think psychological child development, isn't a vast majority of it done from being a toddler to even to the 7-year-old? And you mean to tell me from being a toddler's one on that the parents are going to have a limited basis with this child for the first 2 years, and then an extremely limited and diminished influence on this child from 3 years to 7 years, when that is psychologically the most developing stage of our lives? Who's raising your children? The other tool that they have, which is so effective, my friends, and which they are losing some control of it, is the media. And I thought it would be very interesting to get back to the American Free Press, and I'm not promoting this paper, but this paper is people who, in the up and up, the big wigs, if you would, to use an old British term and a colonial term during our founding era, of a group of men and women that were either in government or in private industry in the media and could no longer look at themselves in the mirror. They could no longer go along with the lies, the deceptions, and all the information that is not just lies, but is not made available and covered up by the media. If you remember that quote that we read to you some years ago from Mr. Mr. Rockefeller, my apologies, that he was very thankful to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and so forth, the mainstream media, for cooperating and going to their meetings and cooperating with the whole process of developing a new world order. And that's the words he used. We read that to you verbatim. So what I'd like to do, my friends, is compare, and I just randomly took some issues of the American Free Press, and I'd like to spend some time with you and go over some of the information that your media, I should say their media, that is met market-wise for your mind, to see the difference. You have some very intriguing people here. Some of them have passed. Jim Tucker, for one, who was the biggest whistleblower that I know of with regards to the Bilderberg Group. Now, if you are not educated yourself on who the Bilderberg Group is, obviously, my friends, you need to do some research. Number one, you need to watch this program more often. And number two, you need to find computer access and look up the Bilderberg Group. And I want to tell you right now that this paper has come forth with where and when they're meeting again this year. And the Bilderberg Group, my friend, is when the Committee of 300 give their marching orders to the media, industry, politicians, military, non-military people, all the people that can control our daily lives. And that's never even talked about in the mainstream media. Why? Because the people of the Bilderberg who control the Bilderberg control all the media in this country. And I'm talking about the print and digital. They are net neutrality now. They got to have net neutrality. What is net neutrality? There's not a problem with the net. Oh, yeah, there is. You know what the problem is for them? They don't control it yet. So we have to have net neutrality. Exactly what is that? Anyway, let us start at the congressional record, because you may be asking yourselves, well, How did they actually take control of the media in this country? Now, we said to you the comment about Mr. Rockefeller. We said to you the comment about John Swinton. But what does the congressional record say about this? Okay. Excuse me. A demand, this is from the congressional record, a demand for an investigation of charges printed in the congressional record by Representative Oscar Callaway of Texas, a passive Democrat, that the J.P. Morgan interest, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interest, and I will tell you, my friends, particularly the powder interest of the day was DuPont, had purchased control of 25 great newspapers to further the preparedness campaign, was made in the House today by Representative J. Hampton Moore, a Pennsylvania Republican. Mr. Moore said Mr. Callaway had obtained unanimous consent to extend his remarks in the record, and his charges had not been read on the floor, but buried in the record. You see how far-reaching their web goes? I question whether a single newspaper in the United States has taken cognizance of the remarks of the gentleman from Texas, said Mr. Moore. I believe they constitute a matter of high privilege. He said that unless some Democrat introduced a resolution to investigate the truth of the charges, he would offer such a resolution. Following the Moore speech, Congressman Callaway told interviewers that he could produce proof of his charges and said Representative Taverner of Illinois would offer immediately a resolution for an investigation of the alleged inspired newspaper articles in behalf of preparedness and preparation in the European war. Understand what they're talking about. The European war is the coming World War I. And who you think are they preparing for and in participation in that European war? The American people. Weapons of mass destruction. Huh? Same thing. This is how they sell this stuff to you, my friends, because they control this. Let us continue. Mr. Callaway's speech, as inserted in the record, charged that in March of 1915, the J.P. Morgan interest, the steel, shipbuilding, and power interest, and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men up high in the newspaper world and employed them to select from the most influential papers in the United States a significant number of them to control the general policy of the daily press of the United States. These 12 men worked the problem out by selecting 179 newspapers and then began by an elimination process to retain only those necessary for the purpose of controlling the general policy of the daily press throughout the country. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest newspapers. The 25 papers were agreed upon. Emissaries were sent to purchase the policies, national and international, of these papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought, to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, banking, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interest of the purchasers. Not the interest of the people, not the interest or general welfare of our nation, but of the purchasers. The contract is in extent at the present time, and it accounts for the news columns of the daily press of the country being filled with all sorts of preparedness arguments and misrepresentations as to present the condition of the United States Army and Navy and the possibility and probability of the United States being attacked by foreign foes. Not much has changed here, huh, guys? Remember, Saddam Hussein, he could attack us. Gaddafi, he could attack us. They couldn't say Somalia and Yemen could attack us, but they could attack our allies. Now we have ISIS or ISIL or Al-Qaeda or Mujahideen, whatever you want to call them today, saying that they're going to attack us here in our country. Well, they shouldn't have a problem get here. After all, the southern border is completely wide open while you and I have to be prodded, questioned, and investigated to travel in our own country. It's because it's not our country anymore, my friends. We've lost control of the government. It is no longer our government. It is their government, the international bankers and the corporations. And it's the same with the media. The policy also included the suppression of everything in opposition to the wishes of these interests served. The effectiveness of this scheme has been conclusively demonstrated by the character of the stuff carried in the daily press throughout the country since March of 1915. My friends, that's 100 years ago. Where do you think they are now with the control? They have resorted to anything necessary to commercialize public sentiment and sandbag the National Congress into making extravagant and wasteful appropriations for the Army and Navy under the false pretense that it was necessary. What was that George Mason said? Necessity is the cry of tyrants. Their stock argument is patriotism. They are playing on every prejudice and passion of the American people. Mr. Sinden asked Mr. Moore what he construed the word sandbag to mean. It means to drive Congress into a corner and make them believe we are in a state of war now, said Mr. Moore. He quoted an advertisement signed by the American Rights League, which began, "To the American people, Germany is at war with the United States. The reputation of past pledges and the threat to destroy our ships and citizens constitute a virtual declaration of war. It is no longer a question of whether there shall be war with Germany. There is war with Germany." Mr. Moore said that among the signers of the advertisement were Dr. David Lyman Albert and Randolph H. McCallum, pastor of the Church of the Epiphany of the City, and went on to criticize the latter for his actions as a minister of the gospel. Mr. Moore then proceeded to declare in his own neutrality, "I am neither pro-German, as some of the panners have recently insisted, nor pro-ally," he said. "I am, as the Congress ought to be, pro-American and nothing else." This was written, this is from the Congressional Record of February of 1917. So, my friends, let's get into some of what my papers are telling me. Headline: Russia and Germany, the new Holy Alliance. New World Order seeks to thwart Putin's Eurasian Union at any cost. This is written by Ronald Ray. The predominant interests of the United States, over which it has fought for wars for centuries. It is a relationship between Germany and Russia, says George Friedman, founder and head of the Stratfor, the private intelligence service known as the Shadow CIA. Aside from its astonishing historical ignorance, the statement is still critically important because Friedman's recent words at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs reveal publicly the current primary strategic goal of the U.S. foreign policy, which is to prevent at all costs the alliance between Russian Bear and the German Eagle, which would doom the global American empire. My friends, then he gets into here the article in his book that he wrote, Mr. Friedman, The Next 100 Years, and he gets into the Anglo-American New World Order strategic plans. He's a former CIA agent, now working for-profit global intelligence to major corporations like Monsanto, Microsoft, IBM, foreign governments, and even the United States State Department. Friedman declarations can be viewed as marching orders to the military-industrial banking media complex. My friends, you're not going to hear that wording in your media or their media. And you're certainly not going to hear about Mr. Friedman, who was very well known in the intelligence community, on the front page talking about American exceptionalism. And the U.S. has the lone world superpower enslaved by its masters. And then they get into the history with Otto von Bismarck, how he reestablished the German foreign policy in Eastern Russia. And all this goes into, the history of the Slavs and so forth, how the CIA has intervened in the Ukraine, how George Soros has said, yeah, we spent $5 billion to implement policy in the Ukraine. Newspapers are not the only news media suffering in the United States. Another article here, News Dive. The liberal, radical, pro-democratic cable news network MSNBC has reportedly seen its viewership fall precipitously for the past several months. In February, it was down 48% in prime time and 43% over the total day as compared to the same month last year. My friends, MSNBC would not be on the air right now, as we reported to you, if it did not receive top funds to keep it going. And I take that a little bit as a victory. Another one here, another article that you're not going to know about is Sheriff Joe, targeted by feds, America's toughest sheriff, facing jail time for enforcing immigration laws. And what he's talking about right here is that basically Sheriff Joe M. Arpaio, referred to by many as America's toughest sheriff, has been ordered by a federal judge to appear at a civil contempt hearing next month to answer questions why the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office has failed to abide by his previous rulings, his being the judge. A U.S. District Judge, Grant Murray Snow, a George W. Bush nominee, scheduled April 21 to 24 for the hearing to review evidence that Arpaio's deputies failed to abide by his injunction to, listen to this, to stop enforcing federal immigration laws. Are you listening to this? Do you understand what's being read to you? A single person, a judge, has overruled all of the nation's federal immigration laws. And this brave, courageous sheriff, serving under the laws through legislation to protect the American people and to protect the border of this country. After all, we have this incredible terrorist threat going on, don't we? So now the judge, the feds are after the sheriff to make him stop enforcing federal immigration laws. You're not reading about that, are you? Bilderberg, 2015 site confirmed. If you get all your information from just their media, you don't even know who the Bilderberg is. And I'm just going to, for the sake of time, I'm running out of time already. The site is going to be the Interalpen Hotel in Innsbruck, Austria. And the date is going to be June 10th through the 14th. So the plans for your lives and your children's lives are going to, the marching orders by the bankers, by the Committee of 300, is going to be given to their stoolies, the media, the politicians, the law enforcement, the education, the NGOs, and at the Interalpen Hotel in Innsbruck, Austria, June 10th through the 14th. How come you're not seeing that in your mainstream media? Another article here about Bill Oyers, how he's financed. If you don't know who Bill Oyers is, you've really got a lot to learn. And I'm just going to keep going here, my friends. They're talking about Common Core. I'm very happy that I think it was the new gentleman taking over as chief administrator of the St. Johnsbury Academy here in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, actually said to paraphrasing, scrap Common Core. Let's go with common sense. I could not agree more, and I applaud you. Another one here. Popular state senators, parents, family uniting to end the microchipping of over 100,000 school students. Texas state senator is standing up for personal freedom and privacy rights by introducing legislation that would ban the planned schools of Texas from forcing radio frequency identification chips into students for the purpose of tracking their whereabouts during school hours. Of course, you know they're going to turn them off as soon as the school hours are over, right? Come on, folks. Come on. Do you really want these people chipping your children? It's bad enough they've dumbed you down enough that you put toxins in their bodies through GMO food, fluorinated water, the vaccines. And now you're going to tell them, yeah, just go ahead and chip them? Why is that not in your newspaper? Loretta Lynch, if you don't know who she is, she's going to be taking over for Eric Holder as the Attorney General of the United States. Attorney General nominee, Queen of Civil Forfeiture. With Eric Holder resigning as Attorney General, this was what, 6, 7, 8 months ago? And this paper is last week in March. Loretta Lynch is undergoing congressional vetting. Although getting rid of Holder is a reason to celebrate after his many scandals of corruption and failure to uphold the Constitution, many people feel that we'd be doing even worse by Miss Lynch. Just ask Americans who voted for Obama thinking they couldn't do anything worse than George W. Bush. We might be in for a rude awakening if Miss Lynch becomes America's new top cop. Before getting into all the reasons Miss Lynch would be a disaster, a politically incorrect observation has to be made. Miss Lynch is black. Excuse me. This doesn't mean that she is unqualified simply because of her race. It only means that President Barack Obama is a racist and that she is a nominee simply because she is black. It is unfathomable that there are no whites who can match Miss Lynch's credentials, considering blacks make up 12% of the U.S. population, while whites constitute 65%. The law of averages would give more than a 5-to-1 in favor toward nominating a white attorney general over a black one. Consider this the second time Obama is placing a black person in that position. The odds become well over 25-to-1, and that is not by chance. My friends, you're not going to see that kind of writing in their media. They want to divide you over race. Let's continue. Miss Lynch will most likely follow the same anti-white policies. Miss Lynch rose to prominence when she supervised the successful prosecution of a white New York police officer who horrifically sodomized a Haitian immigrant, Abner Luyoma, in 1997. The case became a national symbol of white police brutality against blacks. Former representative, presidential candidate, and former U.S. Air Force flight surgeon Dr. Ron Paul, former Republican of Texas, has given some dire warnings about Miss Lynch. Dr. Paul is concerned that Miss Lynch will aggressively increase what is called civil asset forfeiture, an Orwellian term more properly described as civil asset theft. It is where the government seizes cash, vehicles, and other private property from individuals merely suspecting of wrongdoing without evidence, formal charges, or a specific crime. Writing at Dr. Paul's website, John Tate, excuse me, Campaign for Liberty president and good friend of Dr. Paul, said, Miss Lynch's confirmation must be stopped at all costs. Miss Lynch should be nationally known as the Queen of Civil Asset Theft, wrote Tate. He points out that as a U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of New York, Miss Lynch's office seized over $1 billion worth of private property under the guise of civil asset forfeiture just in 2013 alone. $1 billion worth of your property, your sweat equity, by this woman in one small area, Eastern District of New York alone. $13 billion. In a Senate hearing, Ms. Lynch boldly declared this method a useful and wonderful tool. $13 billion in 2013 alone from a small Eastern District of New York of your assets. What is it? It's a useful and wonderful tool. As the Homeland Security definition of a terrorist has now been expanded to include all those who praise the Founding Fathers, criticize the U.S. dollars, millions of Americans could be targets for asset theft. It also seems certain that Ms. Lynch plans to continue Holder's practice of unilaterally expanding the authority of the executive branch and federal power. In a recent Senate hearings, Ms. Lynch was asked by Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, about her views on the constitutionality of the NSA's warrantless and wiretapping program. Without hesitating, Ms. Lynch called the program constitutional and effective. She refused to state whether or not the president has the power to use drone strikes to kill Americans on U.S. soil. My friends, I'm going to stop here for the sake of time. I think you get the gist of that. You are not going to read that in their media. Headline, brother of 9/11 victim sues BBC. Matt Campbell says British news giant had foreknowledge. Now, what this article is talking about, my friends, if you remember Building 7 during 9/11, now if you don't know about Building 7, you've really got a lot to learn. I'm not knocking you, but I'm just telling you, you got a long way to go. Go on the internet. Watch Loose Change 1, Loose Change 2, In Plain Sight, Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. There's many, many of them out there, but them four come to my mind. They're very well done. And what they're talking about is before the Building 7 collapsed, and it came down just like the Twin Towers, right on its own footprint, demolitions, they actually, the leaseholder of the building, Larry Silverstein, actually said, we decided to pull the building. That's a demolitions term, my friend, pull the building. Anyway, this reporter is talking about Building 7 going down. Well, it hadn't gone down yet. They got the timing off. The events of 9/11 was all pre-planned, and not by 19 hijackers who outsmarted, the billion-dollar assets that we have in the Defense Department and all our intelligence agencies. They broadcast, the girl's giving the broadcast, and behind the girl is Building 7 still standing. How did they know that building was coming down? So this gentleman is suing BBC to get the foreknowledge, and you're not going to read that in your mainstream media. PhD engineer assist about the particle beams are used at 9/11. Very intriguing evidence. And I'm just going to go on here, my friends. I'm running out of time. I do want to read some things to you. This is from Paul Craig Roberts, that I have some other things I want to read from him. Now, Paul Craig Roberts, my friend, is the father of Reaganomics. He was the assistant editor of the Wall Street Journal. He cannot look in the mirror anymore. He is using his own website, writing for papers like the American Free Press, bringing out information, historical data, and intelligence that you will not see in their media. They do not want you to know who is really the antagonist throughout the world. They do not want you to know that it was not for Vladimir Putin, we would already be in World War III. Now, I've just got some other things here, my friends. That was just one newspaper, and I can guarantee you're not going to read any of that in their media. Okay, another headline for you here. American Free Press. The big lawsuit in Canada challenges the bankers. Now, you'd think you would hear this everywhere. Mainstream media suppresses news about battle for honest money. American monetary reform author and filmmaker Bill Still, a Canadian activist with whom AFP has been in contact, says Canada's mainstream media has been suppressing news about a landmark Canadian federal appellate court opinion. That decision could lead to the end of Canada's current debt-based monetary system. What an oxymoron. Money does not encompass debt. Black's Law Dictionary. We've read that to you many times. So how can you have a debt-based monetary system? What happened to all the real money? What happened to all the intrinsic valued assets? The billions of dollars of gold, the billions of dollars of silver that were once in the treasury and in the private hands of the American people. You are not going to have that in their media. Jacob, excuse me, let me back up. This is from Arlilo, Ontario, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Arlilia, Ontario, probably. The case aims to put on trial global banking powers and their Canadian representatives, accusing government officials primarily of abdicating sovereignty and subverting the Bank of Canada Act. The governor of the Bank of Canada is just like the governor of the Bank of the Federal Reserve, a private, for-profit, foreign banking corporation. The governor of the Bank of Canada, beyond parliamentary oversight and public scrutiny, just like the Federal Reserve, routinely conspires with foreign interests to deliberate and determine Canadian monetary policies. On January 26, a three-judge panel gave a green light to move ahead with their lawsuit to restore the Bank of Canada to its time-tested mandate of issuing debt-free money in the public interest. Now, this article gets into the whole history about the history of the private bankers taking over the government through the issuance of currency in in Canada. Let us continue. Here's another one you didn't read in their media. The Obama administration, through the GAO office, General Accounting Office, announced on March 10th that of the 11.7 million Americans who now have private health insurance, 86% of them have to get some kind of financial assistance from the federal government to help pay their premiums. Of course, that money ends up in the pockets of the big insurance companies, which lobbied hard to make sure Obamacare was enacted. My friends, Obamacare, they not only pushed to have Obamacare enacted, they wrote Obamacare. Rotten to the core, legislation in Kansas would stop the one-size-fits-all Common Core of federal education. They talk here about liberal John Dewey, believe that schools were social institutions through which social reform should take place. I mean, the information, my friends, is just incredible. Yellen says transparency will hamstring the Fed. Much of the Senate Banking Committee on February 24th, hearing with federal chairwoman Janet Yellen, Senate on legislative proposals to reduce the Fed's closely guarded autonomy. This was her semi-annual monetary policy report to Congress. In particular, the Audit the Fed bill championed by Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, which would task the Government Accountability Office, the GAO, with conducting regular reviews of the central bank's making of monetary policy. So, my friends, who controls the monetary policy of this country? Read this. Is it your non-representing elected representatives? And how can I say they're non-representing? Because they're not creating monetary policy, and they have no control over the entity that is creating the monetary policy. My friends, if you control, Imshar Rothschild said it the best, give me control of a nation's currency, I care not who makes its laws. Because if I'm controlling the purse strings of anything, at any level, I am in control. And what that other article about debt-free money means is that for every dollar, which is not a dollar, it's a Federal Reserve note that's in your pocket, there is an interest bond due on that. We have gone over the mechanics of this so many times on this program through the Coinage Acts, through all these different documents, court findings, historical statements, money mechanics put out by the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank. Remember that document, Money Mechanics? If you haven't viewed that program, go on the internet. It's on the internet. You'll see how it really works. There is no money. We have a debt-based fiat lack of money system. I can't even call it a money system. Money does not encompass debt. Now, I want you to think of this. The bankers and all their cronies throughout the world got 28.3 trillion with a T dollars, Federal Reserve notes. They had to give the Treasury permission to print each one of that 28.3 trillion Federal Reserve notes. And because they gave us permission to print it, to give to them in the first place, now we, you and I, as a surety to this facade fiat debt, because all it is ledger entries, there is nothing backing it up except for your ignorance and your sweat equity. We have to pay them very same bankers who gave the Treasury permission to print that $28.3 trillion to give to them an interest bond due on every one of that $28.3 trillion because they gave us permission to print it to give to them. I am not the smartest man in the world, but I certainly know when I'm getting screwed. And when my nation's getting screwed. Why is there not a word of this in the mainstream media? Now, I don't have the time. I was going to read this very lengthy and very well done article to you by Paul Craig Roberts. And I will continue this next week, my friends. We are going to have our last segment on the documentary that we've been broadcasting to you called Monumental. And the week after that, I'm going to start off by reading this article from these two articles from Paul Craig Roberts. My friends, why is it that you constantly turn your television sets on and you turn on the evening news knowing in your heart and in your intellectual mind that you're being lied to? Why is it that you look to these entities who we have just read to you verbatim from the congressional record are controlled by J.P. Morgan interests, etc.? Why? They lied to you about the Lusitania. Did it happen? Yes, it did. The Germans, as we read to you some time ago, years ago, actually put warnings in the newspaper not to travel on the Lusitania because it was a military, it was carrying military hardware to England, and they put it right through the shipping lines where they knew the wolf packs of Germany were. Why did they not tell you about Pearl Harbor? How we had cracked the Purple Code 6 months earlier. We not only knew the Japanese were coming, my friends, we knew when their two prospective fleets were leaving Tokyo and Hiroshima Bay, where their rendezvous point was in the Pacific Ocean. We moved Battleship Row because we knew the aircraft carrier was the future of naval warfare. And we put them poor sailors and Marines right in a row so they could be cannon fodder to get the American people into war fever. Where was it when Korea, the media, when the general in charge of the theater of Korea, when he implemented his thousands and thousands of troops against American soldiers and Marines in Korea? Where was their media when he said, and this is in General Douglas MacArthur's book, he read it verbatim. The Chinese general said, I would have never committed my troops in the Korean theater of war if I had not certain assurances from Washington, D.C. Where was their media when the USS Maddox was never attacked on August 4th? The whole thing was a facade, sending hundreds of thousands, actually sending just over a million troops for the next 15 years into the Vietnamese theater of war, killing millions of innocent Vietnamese people who just want to be left alone and produce for their family. Where was the media when Robert McNamara, who was Secretary of Defense then, said 30 years later that was all a mistake? Never happened. Where was the media when the USS Liberty was directly attacked? When the President of the United States, as he said, call back the wings. I want that GD ship to the bottom so they could get us in a war, get us involved in the Mideast war that was going on at that time, or about to take place, I should say. Where was the media? Where was the media through all the things that have gone on with weapons of mass destruction and George Bush at his big fundraiser having fun? Oh, they're not over here. Nope, they're not under here. And everyone's laughing because they all knew it was a joke on you. Where was your media? Where is your media when not researching who Barry Soetoro is? Oh, I'm sorry, you know him as Barack Hussein Obama. Where was your media? Where was your media when your children are being poisoned with fluoride, the chemtrail aerosol program? Where is your media with all the vaccines, the repercussions of the vaccines, to include 2 whistleblowers from the CDC recently, which we read to you verbatim, came out and said the CDC has known since 2004 the direct link between autism and the MMR shot. Where was your media? So why are you turning on the tube every night thinking you're being educated, you're being indoctrinated? Where is your media talking about the real reasons why we went into Iraq, the real reasons why we went into Libya, the real reasons why we're in Mali, Yemen, Somalia, Afghanistan, the real reasons? Where is your media? Do you enjoy being lied to? My friends, the information is out there. You can get it. I do not have computer access at home. I have been living with electricity just for the last 5 years. Why do you turn that on? Because you are in a literally, I know this is going to sound corny to some of you, but when you turn that TV on, it literally puts you into what is classified medically as a stage A hypnotic state. You go into a room someday where people are and there's a TV on. Even when they're having a conversation with you, of course, you're not going to have many young people around now because the young people are going to do this. But even if they're having a conversation, you watch their eyes. They will, every once in a while, glance up to that TV. There is a reason for that. It is called a stage A hypnotic state. But where has your media been? Raising the debt level doesn't raise the debt. You can keep your doctor. You can keep your insurance company. No new taxes. It just goes on and goes on and goes on. Your media, my friends, has been attending the CFR meetings, the Council on Foreign Relations meetings, the Trilateralist Commissions, the Bilderberg meetings. They're getting their marching orders from the international bankers. That, in 1915, through the right here in the Congressional Record, took over the media of this country. That is why. Have you ever wondered why the news is the same every day, 24/7? They only put a spin on it left or right? That's because all of your news comes out of the Pratt House in New York and then is deciphered out to the free press agencies. My friends, the world is at a turning point. As Zbigniew Brzezinski said 2 years ago, It'll be 2 years this June. The world is now in a political upstate that the world has never seen before. The consequence of technology, my friends, is incredible. And I will tell you, I am on the shortwave every night. And I constantly am studying, buying books, and I am researching. And I will tell you, and I know some of you are going to find this hard to believe, but I will tell you, if it was not for Vladimir Putin, we would be at World War III right now. Did you know that we are moving tens of thousands of troops into that theater? Latvia, Poland, Lithuania. We are moving tens of thousands of troops and the logistics of war surrounding Russia right now. According to the United States Navy, they are now going to be building a tremendous amount of new bases to facilitate aircraft carriers. And when you look at where these bases are, they're in the Pacific Theater for the future war with China. My friends, the Shanghai Agreement, or the Chinese Bank of International Investment, is going off very well. You're not hearing about that. England, Canada, some of our staunchest allies have signed on to it. The end of the Bretton Woods Agreement is at hand. The end of the dollar as the reserve currency of the world is at hand. You may wake up one morning and find out that that Federal Reserve note that's in your pocket has been devalued even beyond the 2% purchasing power that it now holds from 1913 when the bankers took over the money system of this country. You may find yourself in a situation like the Weimar Republic or Zimbabwe or Argentina in the mid-90s, when their money became so worthless that people were actually using it to start fires. We've all heard the story, or maybe you haven't, about the guy who in Germany during the Weimar Republic saw what was going on. He was very well off. He took a physical wheelbarrow full of money to a store that he'd been doing, his family had been doing business with for generations. The store owner, knowing him since he was a child, told him, "I'll give you this and this and this. Leave the wheelbarrow." He didn't want the money. It was a burden. It was worthless. I know we have a hard time believing that because, my friends, for those of you that are over 50 years old, think of that candy bar I was speaking of earlier in the program was a nickel. Now it's over $1. The candy bar hasn't changed, my friends. It's the purchasing power of that medium of exchange. My friends, you've got to understand that you're being lied to. Your children are being indoctrinated through the public fool system. You are a threat to the bankers who control their government. It's no longer our government. Quit calling it our government. It is not ours. It is theirs. My friends, we always ask you to seek truth, to obtain knowledge, to manifest kindness to your fellow man. And we always close on reminding you that your government is your responsibility. Thank you for watching.
Read between the lines.